What's going on, people? Georgio Savvides here, founder of the Hip Hop Orchestra, as well as the host of the Hip Hop Orchestra Presents podcast. And I got a really exciting announcement to finally make with everyone, is that we have our very first official sponsor for the podcast. Now, they are an amazing company called Eldon's Vault, who are extremely dedicated in bringing you the very best in officially licensed merchandise from pop culture. And when I mean the very best, I mean the very best. They provide things like keyrings, caps, t-shirts, to Funko Pops, to statues from all over, such as DC, Marvel, Disney, The Mandalorian, Harry Potter, music artists from all over the place, and they are ridiculously good. I've got a couple of things to show you on offer at the moment. This trust with their stuff is amazing. So, t-shirts, like I mentioned, like the one I'm wearing right now. It's got Rocky right here, which I absolutely love. Or, like I said, also got Funko Pops as well, 3.75 inches and 10 inches. I've got a couple of 10 inches right here for you. I've got Post Malone right here, and I've also got Biggie right here, who I absolutely love. These are so sick. Eldon's Vault, trust me, they are amazing. Now, I'm going to leave the link below in the video right here, and also in the description below as well in all future videos from the podcast. But trust me, Eldon's Vault are amazing. Website is www.eldonsvault.co.uk. Get in touch with them now and start buying ASAP. But also, before I forget as well, I just want to say the biggest thank you to Eldon's Vault for sponsoring the podcast. It means the absolute world to me. Thank you. And trust me, get in touch with them right now. And I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And peace. Welcome to a brand new episode of the Hip Hop Orchestra Presents, and today we're joined by an amazing guest. He is an arts entrepreneur, marketing consultant, and content creator, David Taylor. How are you, sir?
I'm very good, thank you. Yourself?
Not too bad, thank you. I was saying thank you so much for being a part of the podcast today.
No, it's a pleasure, absolute pleasure.
I was saying just before we started, actually, that you moved to Manchester recently, or this week, actually.
Yeah, this week. So yeah, I've chosen a great time to move to a big city when it's like the middle of like potential lockdown and stuff.
Yeah.
But apart from that, it's good to move back into a big city again.
Good. How you found it so far? I know it's early days yet, but how you found it?
Yeah, early days. I think it's like day 4 at the moment. So to be honest, it's been more just getting unpacked, getting set up, and trying to sort of find a mobile office again. But it's good to sort of I'm in sort of Salford area, so it's nice to have the water and all of the sort of Salford Keys bit, which is great. So
That's brilliant.
Feeling more settled.
Good. You got a lot more to do.
Yeah, there's still plenty to be done. So it's going to be fun, trying to work out where everything is and then sort of work out what we need to get and stuff.
Good. I won't keep you too long then.
No, not a problem at all.
Oh, thank you. But obviously, thank you so much for being a part of the podcast today. I mean, we're following your work for a while now, and what you've achieved in your life is absolutely incredible, and which I can't wait to get into. But before we get into the wealth of hats that you wear or the incredible achievements that you've done, how has lockdown been for you?
Up and down, if I'm being entirely honest. So I think, like everyone, sort of the initial transition of sort of what felt like a lot of chaos at the very beginning, and sort of things sort of dropping out and falling through. It's quite tricky, and I think as well, like my sister and all my family came up to Yorkshire, which is where I was before, and we all lived together for the first 12 weeks, which is quite cramped. So I think there's difficult elements of sort of actually getting through the day to day, and sort of what is quite a strange and turbulent time, and sort of the sort of uncertainty of the world and the sort of the uncertainty of your own journey as well. So I'd be lying if I said it was smooth sailing, but I think it's been really good to see the good that's come out of it and connecting to people around the world, and seeing sort of how musicians are adapting. So part of me is very hopeful of what's going forward, is sort of seeing people really get involved online and sort of find new ways of doing so.
Of course. I mean, were you able to kind of leave your house to go to work, or was it literally everything at home for you?
I'm quite lucky, so I do most of my work at home anyway. So in essence, it was kind of set up at the beginning, which is great. It was just more sort of trying to sort of find as much space as possible when there's sort of 4 people in the house rather than 1, which is a bit tricky.
Brilliant. Oh, excellent. But before we get into your journey, I always love to find out from my guests how they kind of started in their journey. So for you, where did your passion for music come, and how did you get started?
Oh, it was strange. So I mentioned I have a sister who's an older sister who's a very talented pianist. And as a child, I was just sort of like did music because she was older and she did it as well.
Hmm.
So I just kind of copied and didn't really take it seriously. And I originally did cello, and I then switched to. Well, I went to a university to do history originally,
Hmm.
and after like 3 months, didn't really sort of feel it was for me. And then got a fantastic teacher at CBSO, and from there decided to make that switch into doing it properly and went to music college, and that was sort of my starting to taking music a bit more seriously. But up until going to music college, I didn't really practice, didn't really take it that seriously, and just sort of
Really?
it was more social than anything else.
That's brilliant. And even before that, what did your sister play? Actually, you mentioned cello,
Yeah,
but yeah.
she's a pianist.
Oh,
So
okay.
I did piano very briefly and very badly at the very beginning, and then realised there's no point me playing it when the older, more talented sister could play the pieces for me, and it was much easier just to make her do it.
Oh, did she help? Did she help you a lot during your journey as well?
Yeah, she certainly has done, which has been great, and it's always been very handy when I need an accompanist as well. I've sort of giving her a little poke, sort of, please can you come help me out with
Yeah.
this last minute concert project thing.
Oh, okay. So can I say if you've ever like, kind of done work together actually with your sister?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's I think it's a double-edged sword because obviously, like with siblings, you have your own like baggage in the background anyway.
Yeah.
So we get on very well, but there's always that sort of little bit
Oh.
of sibling bit alongside. But it's been good to collaborate.
Oh, brilliant. And is she still into music as well at the moment?
Yeah, so she's a repetitor mainly, and then teaches piano as well alongside. So she's it's been interesting seeing her journey and how she's had to sort of adapt online as well during the pandemic and do so lots of various different things.
Oh, good. How's she been finding it so far?
I think similar in terms of like having all the challenges of sort of work change quite dramatically, but she's been, I think, in a lucky situation where her teaching's continued well, and a few of the concerts and gigs and things that she had have decided to continue paying when they brought them through. So I think she's been in a good situation, but it's difficult for everyone.
Oh, I can imagine. It's good luck to both of you. Like I said, you keep me really busy, which is brilliant. But before we carry on, actually, there's one few things actually which I'd love to find out. You're actually the CEO and founder of the Yorkshire Young Sinfonia, aren't you? The orchestra.
Yes, that
Yes.
ran from 2015 through to 2018.
Oh, okay. Oh, it's just 3 years that you started that.
Yeah, so it was relatively fresh, but then it went I in essence started it in 2014 with the planning and the first course and concerts in 2015, and then it ran for those 4 years, which is it was a really surreal journey.
I can imagine.
And so basically, my area, Yorkshire, has the same population as Scotland, which I always think
Oh,
is
wow.
crazy. People sort of tend to not see. And growing up, I realised there was nothing that pulled musicians together in the same way as like National Youth Orchestra Scotland. And
Yeah.
whereas they have like two professional symphony orchestras, an opera, a ballet, chamber orchestra, and all this stuff, Yorkshire was kind of lacking. And as good as Opera North and Northern Valley were, there was this lack of a cohesive bit of music education. And when I moved back home after teaching abroad for a while, I decided sort of famous last words of how hard can it be to start up your own arts organisation.
Mm.
And it is with this passion of trying to give something to the young people of Yorkshire, but also have like a modern approach to music making. So we had like mental health and well-being. We had parity within the orchestra, so everyone rotated and shared responsibilities. Lots of technology, performance psychology, all these different things going to try and sort of give a 21st century approach to music education.
That's brilliant because I've like looking into it. You were the first orchestra to use iPads, weren't you, as scores?
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
absolutely incredible. So, and it wasn't just as like a digital reader, they were all connected to each other with an amazing app called Music, which is N for Nigel, EWZIK.
Mm.
So, in essence, if you wrote a bowing marking on one part, it would go to the rest of your section in real time.
Oh,
And
wow.
likewise, you could see any other player or desk's part in the orchestra on your iPad, and you could just flick between and be like, oh, I think I'm with the flute at this point, and you could bring up their score, the full score, and see what they've done. And likewise, you could see like, oh, well, do we need to make our bowings the same as the violins? And you could quickly see like what they'd done. It was amazing, and it was quite early on in the journey of the app, so it was
Mm.
really good to see the young people come up with like their own ideas of what it could be, and then the app developers go away and build it in for the following year as well, which was great.
Wow. I never knew, because obviously I've known of the app as well, but I never knew it
Mm.
was that detailed. I mean, how did you manage to have that as part of your orchestra?
It was very lucky, to be honest. It was one of these strange situations where sort of everything aligns at once, and in essence, we were approached by music sort of would it be a suitable project, and the way we came around to it was sort of we'd get sort of a reduced rate, and effectively we could offer press. So then my job on the other side was trying to get as much attention for the app as possible. And we were really looking at getting BBC News and Sky News, and then third page of the Times and all these different things. So we got quite a huge chunk of attention, which is great.
That is
But yeah,
amazing. That is so
I did
good to
like
hear.
have lots of butterflies of like having a room of 50, 60 teenagers and however many iPad Pros all at the same time, and
Yeah.
sort of looking around going, this is gonna end badly at some point if someone knocks one in dominoes over.
Yeah. But it seems like to work really well, obviously, because in the 4 years, we reached over 7.5 million people.
Yeah, so it was only 4 years and 4 concerts and 4 courses. So it's a residential course in effect, and then like with a concert at the end of it.
Mm.
But yeah, we did really well. So the first year was this BBC Radio 4 documentary called Birth of an Orchestra,
Yeah, I want
which
to
is a
ask you about
sequel
that.
to a previous one called Death of an Orchestra,
Mm.
which is about the old Yorkshire Symphony Orchestra, which stopped in the 1950s. And we were really lucky. It was a whole 30-minute program that paired our young musicians and the journey of us starting this new orchestra all the way up to yeah, basically doing the course and what the first year was like, which is, I'm still pinching myself. It's crazy to think it actually happened.
Can imagine, because I wanted to get into that actually. How did
Ah,
that all?
brilliant.
Yes, how did that all come about then? How did you find it as well doing that documentary?
Really fascinating, but it was again something that sort of escalated and trying to sort of put two and two together. So in the first year, we had lots of hit barriers in trying to get to young people and to parents. There were lots of gatekeepers in music, and sort of struggling to get through those. It was trying to find what were unique ways could we get around so we could get sort of connect to young people and connect to musicians. So I had this wonderful idea after hearing the Deaf and Orchestra broadcast of trying to get some of the original members to come to the concert, and maybe use that as a way of getting press and maybe getting to the local paper. And I had this like really sort of lowly, not lowly, but sort of not ridiculous aspirations as to what you could do. And sadly, it turned out, well, they were all in their 90s and they sent lovely like messages and things, but they couldn't travel and all these different things.
Yeah.
But as part of the reaching out process, I had to go through the production company to get to them and sort of find out their contact details. And sort of one of these sort of really cheeky, ambitious moments of just sending off like an email being like, sort of, would this be of interest as a sequel by any chance?
Yeah.
Sort of like a mini outline. And it just grew from there. And it's sort of, I think the average process is 3 months to get through, and we got it through in 4 weeks.
Oh wow.
Sort of like into commission. So it was, yeah, absolutely surreal. And
Like,
again, this really awkward point because it was the first year as well. So I had the radio program commissioned, but I didn't have an orchestra at that time. And I think I
yeah.
had like 15 musicians. And then like trying to then back up sort of, yeah, to get people
Yeah.
in the same place and would it work or not, which is terrifying.
That is terrifying, because I spoke to a good friend of mine recently, actually, who's a documentary maker, Aaron Roach Bridgman. He's done some fantastic documentaries, and he was saying actually how difficult documentaries are, actually how to do them. They're incredibly difficult in terms of getting commissions, actually filming it, going back and forth everywhere. I mean, how difficult was for you to work with so many people yet get it done in the first place? How difficult was it?
It was certainly a challenge in a world I had absolutely no idea about. And I think in a bizarre way, we were lucky that it was a radio documentary, I think, on reflection. And as much as it'd be amazing to be on TV, I think having that sort of lack of stress of lights and cameras and things made things easier. But yeah, it's a whole process I knew nothing about, and having to write sort of the pitches that went into it, but also then try and work out which students should be a part of it and coach them through how to be on in interviews. Also sort of the big parts of the week where I'd be really sort of focusing on something very complicated that was happening, and all of a sudden it'd be like turn around with the microphone in my face and I have to say something clever and smart. So that was definitely tricky. Yeah, it's a very unique thing, but I'm very glad it happened, to be honest. It was such a wonderful process. But
I can imagine. And are you still in contact with anyone from the orchestra to this day?
it's been really fascinating to see where some of the students have gone. So we started this wonderful sort of now 4 years worth of students who've gone on to be in music colleges, and they're now, I guess, we've got our first group of people who've now graduated from music college, which is really incredible. So it's really
Wow,
good to see where they've gone to and sort of what their journeys are now going.
that's incredible. And is this something that you would maybe bring back in the future when everything kind of hopefully comes back in the future?
Potentially. So I certainly, I'm sort of thinking of being a one-man band. Originally, when I created the organisation, I'm not missing the stress of having to sort of work out what to do during COVID. I think it's a headache
Yeah.
I'm very glad not to have. But the reason sort of it did stop was sort of now then getting more questions about how we got all this attention and the lessons I learnt, and sort of finding a new avenue. So it was more that it was me going off on a different path. But I'm certainly not ruling out it being something in the future. But it's yeah, for the time being at least, it's definitely not going to be going forward, because it's this new path that I'm on.
Yeah. And during your period of doing that, did you ever kind of feel overwhelmed with your work involved?
100%. I think it's
Yeah.
one of these things where I could spend sort of the entire interview saying how amazing it was and all these shiny things we achieved, but equally sort of the grunt work that goes in, and sort of nothing sort of prepares you, and no sort of entrepreneur book will prepare you for when everything goes wrong and sort of staring into the abyss of your computer at 3 a.m. and having
Yeah.
cocked up on something. It's yeah, those moments are quite difficult to sort of pull yourself out of. And there was times where I was living on my own as well from working at home, and yeah, sort of after 2 or 3 weeks of not seeing people, and yeah, sort of saying no to friends' invitations to birthday parties or weddings and things, it's quite a lonely journey at times. I think,
and I completely
it does
understand that.
become really overwhelming.
Of course it does. I mean, as an entrepreneur who does so many things, like you mentioned earlier, how do you kind of cope with the stress of doing so many different things at the same time?
I think I've learned by doing it wrong lots of times.
Mhm.
So I originally used to just like,
Mhm.
there's a phase where I just get out of bed in my pajamas, whack my laptop open, just work solid, and
Yeah.
it's not healthy. And for a time being, it worked really well, but I've now become much more aware of treating myself as a resource, and that I have to work on myself and how good I'm feeling, or like what I need to function, and sort of as if I was looking after another member of staff who's like featuring burnout or something.
Mm.
So almost giving myself permission to have time out, or sort of realizing that I need to make sure that I go outside, sociable and various bits. But I think it's from originally doing it the wrong way, and then yeah, learning. But also I've recently, over the last 2 years, become more fascinated about sort of upskilling myself and reading books about people who are successful, or ways that you can improve yourself, or not going full self-help, but sort of being really curious about how you can continue to challenge yourself and grow, I think.
Yeah. And what kind of books have you read recently that really inspired you?
The one I won't stop banging on about at the moment is Philosophy for Life and Other Dangerous Situations by
Hmm.
George Evans, which is an incredible book, and it takes on sort of lots of Greek philosophers and what their ideas in the world were, and how they, particularly Stoicism, and how it wasn't sort of being emotionally numb, but it was sort of taking all your thought processes and examining them and bringing them into the light.
Mm.
And that's been really interesting. I wouldn't say I've totally sort of subscribed to it, but it's been really fascinating to know that that's an option that you can do, and then you can challenge yourself when you go down that sort of like horrible rabbit hole of like negative thoughts or self-criticizing in these bits. It's nice to sort of realize there's options, and you can kind of be in charge of how you decide to react to things.
Of
That's been
course.
one. And not sure how swearing goes in the podcast, so
You
the
can
subtle
swear if you
art of
want
not
to.
it's the subtle art of not giving a fuck is one of the other books as well. That's a very, very good one.
I've heard of that one. Actually, need to check that out. Cause I've heard that's a really, really good book. That one. It's really
It's
good.
incredible. It's also one that's a really entertaining read as well. So it's
Yeah.
not like it's just like preaching to you, and it's more that there's certain things that you should really care about, and you can then not care about the other ones. But that was a really fantastic one as well.
Oh, that's brilliant. And following that documentary, did they want you to do another one for the future, maybe, or was it just a one-off for the time being?
It was a one-off for the time being. So I think there was certainly potential as then down the line, as sort of if it then grew into something bigger, and then I guess what the outcomes would be. But it was very much sort of the start of the journey. So it's because there was this 60-year gap between the previous Yorkshire Symphony Orchestra, which is a professional orchestra in Yorkshire,
Hmm.
for then us trying to then sort of kickstart the next generation of young musicians in a different way as to what's currently happening there.
Oh, brilliant.
And with this overarching Yorkshire feel, so that was where that came
Mm.
from.
And kind of within that 4-year period, you actually won some amazing awards, didn't you? Such as the Arts and Culture Award, Young Achiever of the Year Award. I mean, was that through the orchestra work that you done, or was that kind of from separate projects that you're working
Yes,
on?
so that was all through the orchestra. So the Arts and Culture Award you mentioned was the Welcome to Yorkshire, who are the tourism board for Yorkshire, and they have this big tourism awards every year.
Hmm.
And well, to be honest, we didn't believe that we sort of got to the final, and basically went along for the free food and sort of turned into this dinner thing. And again, sort of from running a business in my bedroom as a self-starter, like the previous winners of this were Opera North and Northern Ballet, who are sort of, the Opera North was like a £20 million turnover or something, and
Wow.
ours was around like 30,000, and most of that went on accommodation for the kids. So then, from sort of winning and then being catapulted into the same category as these two titans from sort of our local area, and sort of how much they were was incredible.
Yeah.
Still pinching himself from that one.
I can imagine. How did that make you feel then, knowing that you actually beaten these, you actually won the award, and you were competing with these titans? I mean, how did that make you feel?
It's a very good question. Very surprised at the time, but it did give a lot of validation. So I think I mentioned there
Mm.
was a lot of opposition at the beginning, and that was mainly through music hubs and music services and various bits, and doors being closed, and basically the musical establishment kept saying no. And as great as it was seeing the students go through, and that was always the priority, there's always this bit of sort of not feeling validated because that never really happened. And so to receive validation from somewhere else, and they were really keen on sort of showcasing what we'd done and all our achievements and things, that was really powerful, and sort of it gave an extra boost. And as you're saying, there's moments sort of, yeah, where you're finding it hard on your journey. It's a big kickstart, and sort of gives you a good adrenaline shot in the arm to keep going. And then it opens so many doors as well, which is fantastic.
Okay, can imagine. I mean, one of the things I wanted to talk to was your in getting into the Forbes list, Forbes 30
Yes.
under 30. I mean, if I talk about achievements, I mean, how did that come about, and how that must have been incredible.
No idea. The genuine, legitimate story is I was lying in bed and I just went on. I saw the list was published and I was genuinely like, oh, I wonder who's on it. And was just flicking through, and then my face like shot up. So I then rang my sister, I think at like 1 a.m, like screaming down the phone, who then told me to very politely go away
Yeah.
and not to wake her up. But it was, honestly, it was such a surreal thing of like your own face coming up. And I think I was next to Ruby from Bake Off at the time or something.
Mm.
And yeah, it was mad. And on the same list was like Rita Ora and Paul Pogba
Yeah,
and
I was
Dua
gonna say.
Lipa and Anthony Joshua was on there. And it's so, it's still weird. I still find it weird to talk about.
That
And
is
again, sort of at the time, like running like sort of bedroom business type thing. It was just surreal.
That is surreal. I mean, to be entered into the top 30, like 30 under 30 from Forbes with those kinds of people, that's what an incredible feeling that it must be for you.
Totally. Like it genuinely, it still feels so surreal. So that was 2018 that happened. So it'll be coming up to 2.5, almost 3 years when it comes back in January. And yeah, it still hasn't become like not an exciting buzz or something.
Okay, is it a yearly thing, or is it every?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's yearly. So I think it's around January it comes out. I know it changes slightly, but I know it's a procedure they're going through at the moment. But it's utterly surreal.
Wow. And did anything kind of lead on from that as well? Were you getting like loads of events to come forward from that as well, or loads of calls?
It's interesting. There was like a mini flurry of attention, and quite nicely, there's the Association of British Orchestras who do a conference every year,
Mm-hmm.
and the announcement was the day before the conference started that it was going to. So straight away, like networking became 10 times easier. It was great.
Yeah.
But then, and they were very kind and retweeted it. So it was nice to sort of get that on to the conference scene. But it's been interesting. It's almost been like a slow burn, and sort of particularly the last year or so, it's really helped. And just something you can keep dropping into emails or mention or use branding and things. And it's been a really useful door opener.
Mm-hmm.
Particularly found more in the States than in the UK. It tends to sort of, I think Forbes has more of a buzz there, or they're more business outward looking. But yeah, it's something that has been really incredibly useful and effective and helpful for going forward and sort of helping to sort of achieve where I want to do things and facilitate.
Of course. And was that kind of uh, on your bucket list of things to achieve?
I think in one of those like far-fetched like dream things of like,
Yeah.
yeah, oh, that's on my bucket list, and like scoring a goal in the FA Cup final and that
Yeah.
type of thing. It was like it was definitely like, wouldn't it be amazing sort of if it actually happened, and then it did, which is absolutely mad. So I think it's definitely a bucket list thing, and I still can't believe it actually happened.
Oh, but you fully deserve it, because the work you do is absolutely incredible, and you fully deserve it.
Oh, thank you very
My
much.
pleasure. But I saw another thing actually where the BBC called you as describes you as an arts innovator, and because you've been a consultant, you worked around Europe and the USA. I mean, what's that been like for you, being a consultant all around the world?
It's really eye-opening, and I think what it's given me a nice bit of context for is that every organization is different, and that
Mm.
almost there's times where I do quite a lot of blogging and about sort of the music and the sector world, and there's times I'll be a bit sort of like, why can't you just do this? And
Yeah.
here's all the answers, just do them. And from doing the consulting side, you sort of realize that there's then all these other complications behind the scene that the public tend not to know about. And it may be the internal politics, and maybe how the structure of the organization works, like geographical limitations. There's so many things. So it's been really eye-opening to sort of see behind the scenes how each one works. And again, bizarrely, I get sort of more passionate and stimulated by like the scrappy underdog ones. And sometimes it's really great to go and work with like a big organization who have lots of resources. But to be honest, it's like the ones I've got to be like, think, how can they get like £5 to go like so far, or like what can they do for free? I think, but it's really interesting. So I spent a good chunk of time last year in Miami with the New World Symphony Orchestra, and they have a
Wow.
concert hall with, I think it's like 8 robotic cameras and a TV crew that's there full time and all these different things. So it's like gadget heaven. And again, yeah, it's just sort of, it's nice to sort of get those opportunities to go and connect, and it's a real privilege, I think, to be invited into places.
That sounds absolutely incredible. I mean, like robotic cameras and all these sort of things. Like, and
It's
then,
yeah, it was mad. It's
um,
it's if you want to look it up, it's New World Symphony, and it's they have a thing called Warcast. So they broadcast once a month one of their concerts inside their concert hall on the outside itself. So they have a park, and you can go and rock up for free and watch the concert with wine and picnics and stuff. And they'll get 750 sold out paid tickets inside, but then 2,000 for free outside.
oh
It's absolutely
wow,
nuts.
wow. I mean,
Yeah.
how were you able to find out how the whole thing came about? Actually, how it went from idea to fully functioning performance. Were you able to find out how it all worked?
So for them, they were, I think, at a very nice moment where they were looking to build a new building. And what they've been previously doing has been finding they're like a training orchestra. So it's that step before being into a full-time professional. It's like an academy type system. So in essence, they try and experiment and push boundaries and train the next generation of musicians in effect. So they've previously been doing stuff about experimenting with digital, all these various bits, and they were very keen on the new building when it happens, having these resources built in already. So I think it was this taking what they'd done sort of on the street with big screens and stuff, and then trying to sort of imagine what the building could be like to sort of support what an orchestra could be in the future.
Mm,
But and I think there's a documentary online or a little like YouTube video about it. But I think it's a really fascinating setup there.
definitely. I mean, where do you see the future of orchestras going? Because we've seen like such amazing things like what you've done with the iPads and so forth to this now Miami. Well, you from your experience as well, where do you see orchestras going in the next sort of few years?
Certainly tricky, and I think to a certain extent it's dependent on country. So again, from sort of the consultancy, it's interesting seeing the different models. So in Europe, there's lots of support from the government or foundations, etc. So in essence, they're a bit more secure at the moment. In America, it's all corporate mainly, so there's different elements there. And in the UK, where I think hybrid, which makes it a little bit more vulnerable.
Hmm.
So as a result, I think the UK is the one where we need to innovate the most because we have to try and earn that money back. And I think that in general, across the world, been quite slow at realizing the potential of digital for orchestras, and
Hmm.
not just say the iPads, but more how you communicate online. And we have all these studies and information and reports saying just how popular classical music is, and it's the fastest growing genre of music on streaming, and the young people are fascinated by it and they listen to it more than it's all these different things. And yet we haven't really, and no large scale orchestra has really decided to give social media a proper go, or to sort of not make basic mistakes, for want of a better phrase. And there's so many things you can see where, like, if you sort of Google sort of like how 5 tips to make your Instagram account better, you'd find the answers for.
Mm.
So I think it's interesting to see when that point changes. So I think, in essence, that orchestras are going to have to become their own broadcasting organisations in order to tell their own stories. And the bit
Mm.
where I get excited about social and online and digital is that you don't have to go through these gatekeepers anymore. You don't have to wait for a producer or for so and so at the BBC Proms to invite you, or like Classic FM to get in touch. You can be fully in control of your story and try and connect people in the wide world. And there's this element of sort of democratized content where if it's good now, you can find an audience that can resonate. And I think then sort of building it up to scale and building those connections on a global level that are really strong, and then finding unique ways of rethinking what that business model could look like that isn't just putting content behind a paywall. It's going to
Mm.
be what orchestras are going to have to do going forwards.
Definitely, because you being a content creator as well, I see that you do your, is it 2 Minute Tuesdays that you do, where you give
Yeah, so
advice? Yeah.
it's been interesting. So it was sort of a lockdown project, and originally at the beginning of lockdown, like everyone else, had this like mild, not mild, serious panic of sort of like what on earth's going on in the world, and like with work being cancelled, what your purpose was. And I was in a situation where I was secure, but going to probably struggle. But had this time on my hands and saw other musicians struggling. And
Hmm.
quite luckily, I had my crisis of having to Google how to sort of do online marketing 4 years ago when I started the orchestra.
Mm.
So I started to churn out blogs to help musicians get through the crisis, sort of like how to be an online musician, ranging from the very basic for someone who has absolutely no online skills and has never live streamed or FaceTimed or Skyped before, all the way up to sort of the more systemic, how do you sort of convert people to being a supporter. So I think in the first 2 weeks, I did 12 blogs and they were like
Wow.
1,000 words each. I wrote more, like I've done more writing in lockdown than I did at university. It's been
You
silly.
can imagine.
It's probably a sign of how little writing I did at uni, to be honest. And yeah, and so as part of that, it was going through like how to do social media, how to do various bits, and they're all written. So there's then some requests on how to do like, could we have a video instruction instead? So trying to provide various bits of creating content for that. So the 2 Minute Tuesdays came out of that and sort of showcasing which buttons to press and various bits, because I certainly empathise that it's such a daunting task if you're going from nothing to trying to do online stuff. So sort of trying to give back. And again, with the blogs, I think in total, it's last time I checked, it was over 75,000 views on blogs and things.
Wow.
And that was, I think, July of last year. So it's probably gone up a little bit. But
That's
yeah,
amazing.
I think it's been really interesting.
It is, because I saw some of the videos. I thought how good they were, like, precise, very clear. And like you said, a lot of people, it's a pleasure. And like you said, a lot of people do sometimes struggle with things like Zoom or which buttons to press or how to do things. So those 2-minute quick videos of how to do certain things, I thought was a really brilliant idea.
Oh, fantastic. And like my timekeeping's terrible, so none of them hit 2 minutes. They're always like 7. But yeah, I think and again, like people learn in different ways. So as good as the writing things down, sometimes actually just seeing which button to click is a much easier way and you can follow along in those bits.
Of course.
And I think it's this, I understand that we're not all identical and everyone has different skills and strengths and things that could be developed. So it's trying to sort of provide as much as possible for helping.
It's brilliant. And I also see you do your own podcast as well, your David Taylor podcast as well.
Yeah, that was again sort of a lockdown thing, and sort of originally trying to again, probably similar to yourself, sort of share stories that are going on and people's journeys, and not just this wonderful like, oh, I've done all these things and I'm now promoting my stuff, but sort of like, I've had a hard week, or this is what I've struggled with, or actually this bit helped and I just took a week off and walked the dog and that was really nice. And so it's been interesting sort of doing that. And again, that then thrust me into trying to sort of learn new skills that then have been helping. So stuff like restreaming and doing how to put stuff out onto like multiple platforms at the same time, and having your own sort of broadcasting software on a computer. So it was also to sort of develop my own skills as well.
Definitely.
And just to connect to people during lockdown as well.
Of course, because I was going to ask you what kind of things you learned actually during your podcast. I've learned so much during doing my own podcast from so many different people, and like you said, it's not just look at what I've done, look at what I've achieved. I mean, we all go through troubles, don't we? Of maybe over being burnt out or working too much or having a stressful week. Just want to go out, walk the dog, wherever it might be. But what kind of other things have you learned actually doing your own podcast?
It's a very good question. I think sort of one of these things, in essence, that be from my side of in doing it is sort of feel the fear and do it anyway. And like I had no real interviewing experience and no idea how to do a podcast and stuff. But in essence, it's been, even though sometimes lots of people will watch and listen, sometimes no one will watch and listen, but it's more focusing on your journey, and that's the benefit and the value to it. It's the value to one person that it's worth doing. But then in terms of guests and things, it's been fascinating hearing again, like people saying what they've struggled with and sort of realizing that we're all in this together. And it's almost that we're more open now. And I think before all of this crisis, there's a definite thing in the music world where you had to always say you were busy. You always had to say you had a gig. You always had to say things are going great. You'd never open up and say like, I'm really nervous about this performance or that sort of thing. And I think sort of it's been great from my side to sort of hear these other stories and things. But also there's been some really nice, sort of fascinating guests. There's someone called Anne Midgett, who's a journalist in the United States, and she was instrumental in getting all the sort of Me Too investigations into James Levine and Placido Domingo, and sort of talking through that journey with her and how she sort of tackled that, and the kickback and pushback was really interesting. But then also sort of people who are at the start of their journeys, I think is fascinating. So there's a harpist called Erilyn Jones, who's head of harp at the Royal Northern, and she hadn't done a Skype or a FaceTime with anyone before lockdown. Since then, she's gone on her journey, and she's now selling like online ebooks and arrangements and doing like video masterclasses around the world, has an entire like online teaching course. And it's great to see people go through those journeys and sort of what it means to them. And she, again, was very, very keen on sort of talking about today's been a good day, today's been not such a good day. And so, yeah, I think the best thing I've learned is that people are really wanting to connect, and that we have this opportunity to reach out and speak to people around the world and have genuine conversations.
Of course, I feel exactly the same way, because I've had the immense pleasure of talking to such inspirational people like yourself, obviously, and even going from England to Trinidad or Canada or America, just talking to different people from different backgrounds about how they did their journeys and the ups and downs that they go through. And it's really inspirational, like you said as well, that people just want to connect, don't they? Yeah. And people don't always realize that. I've mentioned it a few times in the past in different episodes where podcasting in a way is like therapy, isn't it? I felt, yeah, like
yes,
you're getting, yeah, because some people might feel it's a bit weird, but you're just getting things off your chest, aren't you? Really, that
Yeah.
you've had a stressful time, or I've done a lot of things in my life, but I've also had a lot of downs as well, and I've had struggles. I've found this really difficult. So what you see is not always like amazing, but I've struggled as well. So it's just getting things off your chest is an amazing thing, isn't it?
Oh, it totally is. That's it very much is like therapy, and like,
Yeah,
or like you'll come up with an idea and like you'll say it, like, that's really good. Why don't I do that? Like, I really should have
yeah,
done that at some point. It's
yeah.
so surreal. Are there any takeaways that you've had like from your podcasting journeys, sort of like things you've learned or grown
Yeah,
through?
just so much actually about the journey that people have gone through and what they've had to do to get to that moment in their life as well. And it's not everything is as easy as you think it is. I mean, a lot of people, if you're not in the industry, especially, they think that what we might do is really easy. We just turn up, perform, leave, or whatever it might be. And
Mm.
they don't know the hardships that we have to go through to get to where we are. They think like, also like they think, for instance, if oh, David, you're on the Forbes list this year. That was really easy for you, not knowing what you've had to do to get to that point. So it's just,
Yeah.
yeah, so getting these things off your chest and talking to different people from different backgrounds is
Mm.
it's taught me an immense wealth of knowledge. And it's also made me more confident as well in approaching people as well, because
Mm.
beforehand, I didn't really want to talk to that many people. I'm a very introverted person,
Okay.
but which might seem a bit weird. I've got my own podcast now, but it's made me a lot more confident in just talking to people and wanting to learn from different people. Because, like yourself, I do
Mm.
a lot of I do a huge amount of reading about how kind of the best people have done their work, and just to talk to people, I've learned so much that way. But has it also? I want to ask you actually the same sort of thing actually. In terms of the work that you do, because you're obviously an entrepreneur who do so many different things, has it helped you become more, not more confident, but has it kind of changed your approach in terms of doing different projects? Has it made you more aware of how to approach different people, maybe for different projects?
I think potentially sort of again going back to sort of hitting barriers before with my orchestra. I think in a bizarre way, I sort of started doing it to reach out to people before and was
Mm,
networking via like direct messages on Twitter, which bizarrely was really successful. And that was, I think, actually kind of one of the sort of ways of getting into having connections in America originally. So sort of I think I slightly started on that journey before, but I totally agree that it really does help with sort of approaching people and like there's times I think this is ambitious, it's never going to happen, and like you get the nicest yes come back, and you're like, oh crap, it worked.
yeah.
Or the ones that always make me smile are when you get like a really nice no, and sort of like they're taking the time to sort of talk things through, and that's fantastic. And I love what you were saying about that things aren't always as glamorous behind the scenes, and sort
Mm.
of the example I use is that with the documentary, the day that came out, I was also working at a really crappy 2-star hotel on the bar, and it was like old Saga holidays, but like 10 rungs down.
Oh wow.
And like you have to wear this horrible bow tie and striped shirt.
Yeah.
And then I basically like this documentary came out. I listened to it and then went to work and had to call bingo at this horrible, crappy hotel. And sort of like sat there on stage calling bingo, being like, this isn't as glamorous as it sounds on like the radio.
Yeah.
And you don't see that side of like what people have to do to support their stuff to get it through. And I'm sure it's the same for so many other people who will be like doing the bread and butter stuff to make sure they can have, like do what they want to do.
Of course, because
Um,
I've had like a few people come up to me saying like, if I'm not putting content out there, for instance, then I'm not working, not
yeah,
knowing that, well, I'm getting a constant barrage of no's for certain things. And
yeah,
you might say be working on a potential project for say weeks or months, and then nothing happens, and that could kind of ruin everything else, like a domino effect, isn't it? Where you're focused on one
mm,
big project, for instance, and you say no to everything else to focus on that one, but then that falls, and you potentially lost other contacts as well, thinking, oh, I've done all that work on
yeah,
this one
yeah,
potential thing, and because you might go for, like I just said, about maybe going for weeks or months without sharing anything, maybe little teasers here and there to keep people interested.
mm.
People like say, "Oh, you should do more work. You should work harder." I think you don't understand what
You
I've
haven't
been
seen it.
doing.
It's like 3 a.m. I'm banging
Yeah,
my head against the laptop.
yeah,
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 it's surreal. I think partly that's one thing that may have come out of lockdown. People have empathy a lot more for content creators and stuff, and
yeah.
like they'll realize that it's so hard to do, and it is a full-time job in effect, or there's so many complications. And as you say, like the amount of like, what's the metaphor? When you see like a duck swimming across water and it's all
Yeah,
calm on top and the legs are going frantic.
exactly.
It's that
Yeah.
sort of thing. Like you don't see all the grind that goes into it.
Exactly, and another kind of funny thing that happened recently as well is me. I'm a music teacher by day, so that's my kind of bread and butter, which I absolutely adore as well. And when we kind of had to do, say, homeschooling for a little while, I'm back to schools now, which I'm thankful for, really thankful for. But that kind of period where we had to teach online for a while, parents didn't realize how hard teaching actually was as well.
Yeah.
And they were just sending me a message, going, "Oh my God, I'm so grateful for you being a teacher now. I didn't realize how hard it actually was." It's like, well, there you go.
It's my world.
Very welcome welcome to my world. Oh my God, it's amazing.
Totally.
But like I said, it's, what you do is absolutely incredible. And just to be able to talk to you today, I've learned so much more as well. But so thank you for being a part of it today. But
No, it's great to be here. Thank you so much. And
thank
it's
you.
also, I think, great to hear sort of, your journey and what you've been doing. So I hope it's people listening are sort of going to check out more of the podcast and stuff.
Definitely. But one thing I love to ask people as well, actually, before we finish, is what have been some of the best lessons that you learned on your journey so far?
The tricky question. Fail fast and fail often, I think, is a phrase that I've absolutely loved.
Mm-hmm.
The one that I've been sort of, like, always coming for me like little phrases or like things I've
Yeah.
picked up from places. Perfect is the enemy of good has been another one where like as musicians, like I know that inside I'm like this horrible perfectionist, and that's a negative, I think, and that you're always trying and want something to be perfect where you post it or you do it or you reach out. And in essence, if something's good enough, you need to get it done and get it out, and sort of that's maybe your fastest route. So I think for me, they're probably the main two. Probably, in fact, anything, it's more just sort of like how I function as a person and learning more about myself and what works and what doesn't, and that at times you need to give yourself that break. I think that's been what I've really learned over my journey and things. And that also then on the flip side, that everyone has their own struggle and their own battle going on. So not to take things entirely personally if someone snaps at you or whatever response that is. Everyone has their own things, sort of being a bit more empathetic to others.
That's brilliant. Thank you. That's a really good way to finish. But thank you so much, David. And then how can people find you actually online?
Yeah, so the website is david-taylor.org. On Twitter, Instagram, it's David Taylor _UK, and on Facebook, it's David Taylor UK. And if you Google me, I'll come up at some point. But there's quite a few David Taylors in the world, so you might have to scroll past a snooker player and someone.
Yeah.
But they're probably the main places to find me.
Oh, brilliant. But thank you, honestly, thank you so much for an amazing episode, David. Thank you. And I'll
Absolute
speak to
pleasure.
you
Thank you for
soon.
having me.
My pleasure. And take care, everyone. Bye bye.
Bye bye.